everyone, Sabrina here from Scrappy Tales Crafts, and today I'm going to show you the first 5 cards that I created with the Simon Says Stamp June 2020 card kit. This kit had a butterfly theme to it, and the pattern papers in the kit were vintage style, so I decided to take inspiration from them and create 10 vintage cards, which is not normally my style, but I wanted to challenge myself. I have been making a lot of bright, colorful cards lately, and I kind of wanted to do something different. I knew a lot of people would be coloring these butterflies in very bright colors, so I thought I would try out the vintage look, and I'm really happy with how they turned out. You can see I stamped all of the butterflies from the stamp set onto craft cardstock with my vintage sepia VersaFine ink. This ink is a pigment ink, so it takes a little bit longer to dry. So I did clear heat emboss all of my butterflies. I did my stamping, coloring, and fussy cutting before I started my 10 cards. So I'm just going to show you how I colored in each butterfly from the stamp set. I am using my Prismacolor pencils. I really love the look of color pencils on craft cardstock, and I think it helps to mute down the colors and add that vintage look, which is what I was trying to go for. You can use your Copics on craft and you will get a similar muted look, but I think the pencils are a little bit more brighter, especially pastel pencils. You can see that yellow butterfly on the right is very eye-catching, and that is because I used mostly my yellow pastel pencils on that one. And as I color these butterflies in, I'm going to start using lighter and lighter colors because I really like how they pop on the craft cardstock. And because I embossed these butterflies, they have a really nice shiny look to them, and they're a little bit raised. I will say, if you're using color pencils, maybe not to emboss your images because the embossing powder will wear down the lead. So I had to sharpen my pencils pretty often, but it wasn't a huge deal. I think it was worth it because I really like the shiny look that the embossing powder gave. I did stamp out each butterfly, I think 2 or 3 times, and that was enough for me to make 10 cards. I didn't have any leftovers, so if you want to know exactly how many butterflies to stamp, color, and fussy cut, you can plan out your 10 cards. I did not. I just got lucky that I had just enough butterflies. If you've been following me for a while or you watch my 10 card 1 kit videos, you know that this is typically what I do. I like to get all my coloring and cutting done in the beginning so that I just have a big pool of images to work with and choose from to add to my 10 cards. Usually I have more than I actually need, so I'm also not as stingy about putting images on my cards because I know I have more to use, if that makes sense. And it also just saves me time. I don't have to stop, stamp out an image, color it, and then cut it out. So I do like to do this. Also, I like doing it because while I color, I start to get ideas of what my 10 cards are going to look like. So that is what happened while I was coloring these images. When I looked at some butterfly references, I saw a lot of blue and green ones. They were the ones that I was really drawn to. So for this larger butterfly, I wanted it to be green on the tips of its wings and then have it fade into blue as it got closer to the body of the butterfly. So here you can see I'm adding the green to the tips of the wings, and typically I like to work with my darkest color, go over it with my midtone, and then I will leave a little bit of space in the center to add my highlight color. But when I color on craft, I really like those brighter colors. You can see this is my lightest green, and it's definitely the green that's popping out the most. So I tend to use more of my lighter color than I typically would if I used Copics or if I was coloring on white cardstock. And again, that's just because I want my butterflies to pop. Right now I'm adding the blue color towards the center of its body. I'm going to take a lighter blue, go over the darker blue that I added and a little bit towards the green color, and then I'll take that lighter green again and blend the blue together. Normally when I work with my pencils, I go over the image 2 or 3 times to get a nice blend, but I didn't have to do that with the butterflies just because there's so much detail on them. The majority of the butterfly is covered by the brown ink, so I only had to layer my colors together once, and I was pretty happy with that. I think this is the last butterfly that I'm going to show you. And I'm going to take my white color pencil, and just like the pastels, white is going to really pop on craft. You can see I'm adding it to the edges of the butterfly's wings. I noticed a lot of monarchs had white spots on the edges of the wings, so I did that to a few of my butterflies. And now I'm going to get started on card 1, and I actually don't use any of the stamped butterflies on this card. I'm just going to use the stencil. So I taped it to the back of a craft panel that is cut to the size of an A2 card base. I wanted to use up as much of the stencil as possible, so I didn't cut down my panel. I'm going to ink blend Salty Ocean and Broken China onto the stencil. And before I remove it, I'm going to take the Gina K glitter gel and a palette knife, and I'm going to scrape some of this over the stencil. Now, I don't think I used it properly. I'm not sure what I did, but it did seep out underneath the stencil, so you're gonna see when I remove this, I have a little bit of a boo-boo on the bottom right corner. So I'm gonna show you guys how I fixed that. And I must have not scraped it very evenly because the glitter was kind of chunky in some areas and flat in other areas. And I don't know, I really like blending through stencils, but I always have a tough time with any kind of paste. So I guess I have to keep practicing it. But the glitter gel is really pretty. I like that it's more of a chunky glitter, so it is very eye-catching. So what I'm doing now is I'm going to white heat emboss and gold emboss 3 of the smallest butterflies from the stamp set. I'm going to use the gold ones in another card, and I'll use these white ones on the card that I'm working on right now. I'm going to fussy cut them out. I didn't bother to cut the antennas, I just cut the wings. And I'm going to use these white embossed butterflies to cover up that mistake I made earlier. I think these small ones were a little too small. They didn't cover the mistake completely. So I'm going to stamp out a larger one and cut it out and add it there. I'll use 2 of the smaller ones around the butterfly trail towards the top. I'm now going to work on the sentiment. I chose Beautiful Friend, and I wanted a 2-tone stamp, so I'm going to use the Distress Oxide inks that I used on the background, Broken China and Salty Ocean, and I'm going to add the Salty Ocean to the bottom part of the stamp and Broken China to the top. I went back and forth between the 2 inks to try to blend the centers together, and I'm really happy with how that looks. Below it, I'm going to stamp You Are Enough with VersaFine Onyx Black ink. I thought about using a black and white heat emboss sentiment, but I didn't really like it. So here's that larger white embossed vellum butterfly that I'm going to add. I wanted these butterflies to have a little bit of blue, so I'm taking whatever's left on my blender brush and adding some blue ink behind the butterflies. And that's just going to tint them slightly. So I'll just arrange them onto this panel again. And I like how that looks. I really like craft cardstock with white. That is actually the color scheme I went with for my wedding invitations. So I do enjoy making vintage style projects. I used to just do vintage cards and mini albums. That's how I got started in crafting. So I did enjoy using this kit and creating these vintage cards. I added a lot of tape because that paste kind of warped my panel. So I wanted to make sure that this laid completely flat. I did glue this panel onto a 110-pound white Nina A2 card base. The cardstock that came in the kit I also made into card bases, so you will be seeing those later on. To embellish this card, I'm just going to take some Trinity Stamp gems. This particular gem pack has different colors, I think pink, green, and blue. I'm just going to use the blue color because that matched my Distress ink perfectly. So I added a few of those along the butterfly trail. And that's going to complete card 1 using the stencil and the Glitz Glitter Gel by Gina K. Here in the close-up photo, you can really see how that glitter paste shines in the light. It is really pretty. Moving on to card 2, I wanted to create my own pattern paper using the butterflies from the stamp set, so I lined up each one into my MISTI, and I'm going to stamp them onto this craft panel that's cut to 4 by 5¼ inches. I'm using every butterfly apart from the largest one, and now I'm going to realign these to stamp them at the top. You can see I kind of struggled to fill in all the areas, but I will eventually get it. I'm stamping these butterflies with my vintage sepia VersaFine ink. I really like this ink because it's pigment. It will dry slower, so I'm going to add clear embossing powder over these butterflies. When you heat set clear embossing powder, it's going to make the ink that's underneath it slightly darker. And I thought that looked really pretty, and it ended up looking exactly like pattern paper. I'm also going to use that vintage sepia to distress all of my card panels, so that's what I'm doing here. I'm taking an ink dauber and that same vintage sepia ink and just adding the ink around the edges of this panel. I think vintage photo distress oxide ink is very comparable. It is a mixture of pigment and dye ink, so you can still pour clear embossing powder over that. I didn't have vintage photo, so I really like the vintage sepia. I die cut a circle from some cream cardstock, and now I'm going to stamp the largest butterfly in the center. Again, I'll clear heat emboss it. I have this big wow container of clear embossing powder, and I've used up a lot of it. I'm just going to heat set that butterfly, and then I'll color it in with my Prismacolor pencils off camera because you guys already saw that. This was the only card that I stamped and colored in while I was creating the card because I knew I wanted it inside a circle. But for the rest of my cards, I'm going to use those fussy cut butterflies. I'm going to go over the panel again because I did die cut it using a stitch rectangle die, and I'm also going to go around the circle with the vintage sepia. I do think that helps to create the vintage look on my cards. I'm now going to add some ink splatters using my turquoise watercolor from Daniel Smith. This is a dot sheet, and I got it in a Hero Arts kit a long time ago, and it has lasted a very long time. I'm also going to add some gold splatters using my gold Kiritaki Gonzai watercolor. I added the splatters to the circle and to the card panel, and I like how that looks. I think it added a nice artsy look. So I'm going to stamp out Thinking of You and Friend onto some cream cardstock using that vintage sepia ink. I thought about gluing them at a diagonal like that, but I ended up just gluing them straight underneath that circle. I'm going to add this Life is Wonderful sticker to the center of my butterfly. You did get a pack of stickers in the kit, and I will say they are not really sentiments. Like, I wouldn't foresee myself using any of these apart from the one that I just used onto any of my cards. I think they're good for Bible journaling because there's some religious sentiments, but nothing like, there's just some really random sayings on those stickers. So I tried to use it on one card and I did. So I was able to use all the supplies in the kit apart from those Tim Holtz letters. They were just too big to add onto a card. So if you guys use them, let me know what you did with them. I might keep them for like a pegboard, but I wanted to stick to cards. I know if I started like a mixed media project or a DIY home project, it was going to take hours. So that's going to complete my second card. I did add some Trinity Stamps pearls as embellishments, and I really like how that one turned out. It's one of my favorites. Moving on to card 3, I'm going to stamp You Are On My Mind onto this scrap of paper, which I fussy cut from the pattern paper. I did heat emboss that off camera. I'm going to take one of the orange monarch butterflies and I will add it to this card. I'm going to add vintage sepia ink around the edges of each of these card panels. This one that I'm inking up now is a cut apart, and it says Thankful for You. And then these other panels I cut from one of the pattern papers. It just had a collage of different images, I guess. And that's the same one where I cut this "You Are on My Mind" panel. I'm going to ink up each one with a vintage sepia. I really think that helps to make my cards look old. And I'm basically just going to create a collage with all of these images. I'm going to take my card panel and arrange these cut aparts until I find an arrangement that I like. And I plan on putting my butterfly right in the center there. And now I'm going to take those gold heat embossed butterflies that I stamped on vellum. I'm going to fussy cut them out, and I'm going to use them on this card. I think these help to just finish off the card and fill in those blank areas. So I think that's the layout that I'm going with. I'm going to go ahead and start gluing. I'm using my art glitter glue to attach everything. I really loved the pattern paper in this kit. I used every single sheet of it for my 10 cards. I did have some scraps left, but I didn't keep them. I do throw away like really tiny scraps. All I had left were strips and some small rectangles. Let me know if you're someone who hoards paper, like even the tiniest of scraps. I used to be that way, but I'm not anymore just because it like piled up and it basically just made my craft room really messy. So I do part with some of my pattern papers. I only keep like really large chunks of paper, but let me know if you have that problem because I definitely used to. So you can see I added foam tape behind my largest butterfly and I added glue to the body. I just wanted the wings to pop up. So that is what I do for most of the butterflies on my 10 cards. I'm going to glue this panel onto a yellow card base that I created with the yellow cardstock from the kit, and that's going to complete my third card. I didn't add any embellishments to this one. For my fourth card, you can see I went ahead and cut some 1.5 inch strips from this pink butterfly pattern paper, and now I'm going to go around each one with my vintage sepia ink, again to add that vintage look. I definitely think you could have made regular butterfly cards with this kit. Not every single sheet of pattern paper looked vintage, including this one. I think it would be really fun to see these butterflies in super bright colors. And like I said earlier, I think it would be fun to see these butterflies colored as moths. So I'm adding some vintage sepia to my pattern paper card panel as well, and onto my sentiment, which I chose Thinking of You from the stamp set. I'm now going to arrange my strips onto my card panel, and I like how that looks. I'm going to go ahead and glue them down using my art glitter glue. That middle strip I'm going to pop up with some foam tape. I just like to have dimension on my cards, and I am running out of foam tape, so I'm going to have to buy some more. So I'm going to flip that panel around, trim off the excess, and then I can start to add my butterflies. So here's that beautiful yellow butterfly that I colored earlier. That one was my favorite. And now I'm trying to figure out where I want to add my Thinking of You sentiment. I really liked the writing or the font on the sentiments in the stamp set, and they worked for a lot of different occasions. I'm now adding foam tape to the back of my butterfly wings. To the bodies, I'm just going to add art glitter glue because I just want their wings to pop up. So I will have to hold the bodies down for a few seconds to make sure that glue attaches nicely. So I will glue down the Thinking of You flat next to that orange butterfly, and then at the bottom of this panel I'm going to add a twine bow. In my stash I have some orange twine, and it's solid. So I thought it would look nice on this card. I'm going to wrap it around the bottom and tie a bow. Of course, I couldn't tie a bow properly on camera. It took way too long, so off camera I redid the bow. But I guess I'm going to amuse you guys and show you how I created my failed bow. It actually wasn't that bad. I think the reason why I had to redo it was because it wasn't tight enough. And I also thought it wasn't showing up well, and I wanted to double up the bow. So that's what I did. I'm going to just glue that to the left side of the panel. And then to embellish it, I'm going to add some pearls. I think pearls are a nice accent to vintage projects. And I'm just attaching those with my art glitter glue. Now I'm going to take a pink card base, and I believe I go around the edges with my vintage sepia ink. Yes, I do. Just so that everything coordinates. And then I will add ATG tape to the back of that panel and attach it. And then that will complete my fourth card. Here's a close-up of that one. And now we're on to card 5. So I'm going to take some of the pattern papers from the kit. I'm going to cut an oval from one of them. I did cut it into a small rectangle first. And here I'm just playing around with the different pattern papers, trying to figure out what I want it to look like. And now I'm going to take the other pattern papers, and I wanted to do some fussy cutting. I really liked this wreath, but it was just too big to put on a card, so I sacrificed it and cut right into it. I'm going to cut a chunk of these flowers out, and I'm going to add them to the top of this card panel. I will end up making this even smaller. I thought at first I wanted it to frame the top of the panel, but I felt like it was just too big and a little bit too distracting because I wanted to use that large green butterfly. And I was also struggling with the pattern paper. I thought maybe it was a little too busy. So you're going to see I'm going to change up a few things. I'm going to first stamp out the sentiment, "Even as the rain pours, I'm here for you," that fit perfectly onto that orange panel. As usual, I'm going to add vintage sepia around the edges of pretty much everything, including those flowers that I fussy cut. So I am not a subscriber to the Simon Says Stamp card kit club, but I do every once in a while pick up a kit, and I was really drawn to this one because of the butterflies. I am embarrassed to admit how much like craft supplies I have with butterflies on them, but I like that these were realistic looking butterflies and that they could also kind of work as moths. So I did enjoy working with this kit. You can see as I ink these elements up, I opted to use some more subtle pattern papers for this card. Okay, so I like that layout. I'm gonna go ahead and start gluing some things down. I'm using my art glitter glue. I will pop up the oval with foam tape, I think. And then I'm going to pop up part of the flower where it overlaps the orange pattern paper. And I'm going to add art glitter glue where it overlaps the oval. I want everything to be level with each other. And then just like with my other butterflies, I'm going to just add foam tape to the back of this one's wings and then glue to the body. And I believe I will add some pearls, and then that will complete my 5th card. I'm not sure if this kit has sold out already or not. If it's not, I will have it listed down below. I do use affiliate links, and that means if you use my links, I will get a small commission off of your purchase. And everything I earn from my affiliates, I put back into my channel. I also sell my cards on Etsy, so I will have these cards listed over at my Etsy shop if you want to purchase them. And I will have a link to all of my shops and my website down below. I'm going to glue this panel onto a yellow card base, and that will complete my 5th card. Here is a close-up and then another close-up of all 5 cards. I will have the card showcase in part 2 when I show you all 10 cards. So thank you guys so much for watching, and if you haven't yet already, please subscribe to my channel, and I will see you next time. Bye!